Time now for The Hill, moderated by Blake Berman.
All right, so is this good enough to get it done? For the first time, Nikki Haley throwing her support behind Donald Trump while offering a warning.
I will be voting for Trump. Trump would be smart to reach out to the millions of people who voted for me and continue to support me, and not assume that they're just going to be with him.
And is this a warning sign for the incumbent, Charlemagne the God, who has a following by the millions, who President Biden openly courted, prodded to endorse the president today, but wouldn't do it?
I think both candidates are trash. I am going to vote in November, and I'm going to vote my best interest, and I'm going to vote who I think, can preserve democracy.
Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, here we go. Hanging out with us today, Linda Tran, former senior advisor to the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Kirk Bardella, Democratic strategist, NewsNation contributor as well. Aaron Perini, Republican strategist. And Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House chief of staff, NewsNation contributor as well. Hello to you all. Nice to have you in.
I'd like to be called Mick the God or something.
Mick the God?
Can we do better than that?
You tell me if you could do better than Mick the God. I'm not sure I can.
Pep in the Short,
you don't like Hot Mike with Mick?
Leo the Great.
What about Hot Mike with Mick?
Mick is good, but how do you get a name like that?
I don't know. I don't have one.
Is that his given name, do you think?
We've had Mr. Wonderful on the show, Kevin O'Leary, a bunch.
That's true. He is wonderful, though. That's true.
He is. I'd love to get Charlemagne the God on the show, by the way. We'll get there in a second, though. Senator James Langford, I think you just call him Senator. He'll be joining us here in about a half an hour or so. He's the architect of the border bill, the Republican. Going to ask him why all of a sudden now he's not supporting this Hot Mic with Mick we'll get to. But let's start with Nikki Haley.
All right.
And Charlemagne the God and sort of what this means for both of them. Nikki Haley today saying, I'm going to vote for Trump, but she kind of lectured him, did she not?
Sure. And, there's a lot of folks who've tried to do that over the course of the last several years, but tell Donald Trump how to run a race. I've tried occasionally.
Okay.
And I always get the same pushback, which is, so tell me, how many elections have you won for president?
Right.
We're doing it my way.
Right.
How many elections has Nikki Haley won for president? Fewer than Donald Trump. So listen, she has to say this, right? I mean, she's going to try and stay relevant. She didn't endorse him today. She said she's going to vote for him, so she's still splitting hairs there. But it's the right thing for her to do. Come on, say she's going to going to vote for President Trump. Not surprising.
You know Donald Trump well.
Yeah, yes.
What about what Mick said there and what Nikki Haley said? Do not assume that they are going to be with him.
Well, I think when you look at Nikki Haley voters, those who continue to vote for her even right now up and through the primary, you're seeing what a lot of people are calling the double haters, those who don't want to support Trump or they don't want to support Biden. So having a conversation and trying to court those voters is something both campaigns should be doing fervently right now. So I understand Nikki's point, but she's kind of playing it both ways here, saying, yes, I'm going to vote for him, but not giving her full endorsement.
But is she right?
Yeah, she is. I mean, this is what we've seen already. The Biden campaign has made a concerted effort doing some targeting ads towards those Nikki Haley voters, towards people who are disaffected right now from Republicans.
So is that wasted money now that she's come out and said, vote Trump? If you're Democrats, do you stop throwing dollars after that strategy?
Her point is, if Donald Trump isn't going to actively court that voting bloc is there for the taking. Nikki Haley saying one time, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump, and that's it. Well, that's a lot of playing field left there that Democrats can definitely play on right now.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody think this moves the needle at all?
No.
What do you think?
Not a single, maybe one vote.
No endorsements ever.
That's hers.
Yeah,
I think that's the only vote that counts. I still don't think the folks who voted for Nikki Haley are really Nikki Haley voters. They're just not ready to be Trump voters yet. Her advice is right.
Yes.
Go out and talk to these voters. Right. But I don't think her endorsing him, which she didn't do, her voting for him more accurately, I think that gains him one vote.
One vote?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, look, they're Republican primary voters, so they're a really hard sell for the Biden campaign no matter what. These are engaged Republicans who fight for their party, right?
There were a number of Nikki Haley voters who were Democrats and who were independents. There were a number of states where the majority of her votes weren't coming from Republicans. So this is actually
those open primaries.
Those open primary states really, that was her game plan, and her campaign manager put out the memo saying, we've got open state primaries coming up. This is how we're going to move through this. So for them, this is fertile ground across the board for both Biden and Trump.
You know who knows Nikki Haley fairly well? Come on in.
Charlemagne the God.
Nick does. I don't know if Charlemagne the God knows Nikki Haley, but come on in, Ashley Davis.
I just like saying that.
Former George W. Bush White House official. Friend of the show is the title that I'm going to use. If you watch the show, you know Ashley's on all the time. You are in sort of Nikki Haley's inner circle. You were at the speech today, Ashley. I wonder what you made of it.
First of all, I'm banished to Mick's pod that he has to use after he gets off long flights, so I can smell you in here, Mick.
Right now.
But all seriousness, first of all, the snippets that were played, and I love the media, obviously, that was a little cut and paste of what was really said. So we have to remember she was at the Hudson Institute, which is a foreign policy think tank. She's now chair of the board. This is her job. She gave a very, very, very strong foreign policy speech on why we should continue to support Israel and Ukraine, and very strong on anti-China and what will happen with Taiwan if we're not a leader in the world. So that was the main focus. She went from the speech to a sit-down question and answer, and the question was mainly around foreign policy. And then the person asking the question said, Nikki, with all of these conversations that you said and what needs to happen in the world, would you be voting for President Trump or President Biden? And she said that when there's the border, there's the economy, there's inflation, and she said that President Trump would be the right person for the job and that she would vote for him. And then she pivoted to kind of saying why she would vote for him. And then she said, but I do have to say that it would be very helpful. I have all these million of voters, the clip that you showed. So it wasn't a lecture at all, at least in the room as we felt. And no one took it away from that. And actually, when she did say that in regards to that she'll vote for President Trump and that there were that she had a lot of people that still support her, right, there was a lot of applause in the room.
All right. Ashley, hang by for a second. So that's Nikki Haley. What about on the other side? Charlemagne the God today. Massive following. President Biden had courted him, had appeared on the show, and he called him trash. Called Donald Trump, didn't name check him, but the hosts on The View were like prodding him. Why won't you support President Biden? Why won't you come out and endorse President Biden? We need it. I'm paraphrasing here. And he said they're both trash.
Well, first of all, we should be clear that that is Charlemagne the God's
his
brand,
opinion,
right? But it's also his brand, is to be a little bit incendiary, to say things that are quote unquote outside of the box. There's a long road between now and November where we may see things shift. But, it's not a good day when one of the most popular radio hosts on Black radio in particular says something like that.
Who the campaign wanted.
I've always said, I don't think endorsements from any of these people, celebrity on either side, matters one bit. I just don't think it matters.
But what about being on his radio show? And the context of it was essentially he's not going to talk up the president on his show. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily an endorsement, but he's not going to go out there and sort of rattle off.
He's not going to do that right now here in May of 2024. Exactly. I believe that by the time we get to the fall and the campaign is in full swing, I believe that even if he's not talking up Biden, he will be talking down Trump.
Ashley?
Yeah, I actually agree that I don't think that these endorsements, I think going back to our earlier segment, someone like Nikki, I think it brings more than one voter, as someone was saying, but I don't think that these celebrities mean anything. It's like, who's Kim Kardashian endorsing? Like, who cares?
Right. Okay. All right. Meantime, he wanted to be president. He is believed to now want to be vice president. And today, he just revealed a major money move. That man right there, Vivek Ramaswamy, the entrepreneur turned Republican presidential candidate, unveiling that he has taken a nearly 8% stake in BuzzFeed. Now, the online media company shuttered its news division last year amid broader layoffs. But the news here sent the stock up today 20%. What's going on here, Mick? Because he started buying the first shares, according to the filing, a week after Super Tuesday.
No clue. I don't know Vivek, so I'm going to guess. Ordinarily on this show, I give educated guesses. This is an uneducated guess, but see if this sounds about right. He wants to be a player. He's looking for a way to stay involved. He's looking for a way to stay relevant. And if he can put sort of his thumbprint on BuzzFeed, which has still got a decent-sized audience, he figures out a way to stay relevant. So he does this. Maybe he gets a cabinet position. Maybe he's Secretary of Commerce, something like that. He's relevant for 2028. in the back of my mind, I wonder if there's a long-term play here to try and do something with Trump Media.
With Truth Social.
With Truth Social. They figure out a way to maybe buy that out, do Donald Trump a favor, buy his company, but that's several moves down the chessboard.
So like Vivek Ramaswamy, right? Nobody in politics, yet alone around the country, essentially knew who this guy was. He then lasted longer than a former vice president and a sitting United States governor and a former governor in the campaign. And now all of a sudden he's maybe trying to wiggle his way into a media company. Like, what do you think's, Republican politics, what do you think's going on?
It screams entrepreneurship to me, but it doesn't scream political motivation, because the 8% stakes, while he's talking about overviewing, the business and trying to rebuild, because it's obvious that BuzzFeed has had a number of business-related issues.
Right.
There's no news side to it anymore. And to Mick's point about maybe a few chess plays down the, down the game, where maybe this has something to do with Truth Social, that would send BuzzFeed burning to the ground. I just can't imagine that those employees would be super excited about that pair up.
I don't think it's an accident that he has taken an ownership stake here in a company that is mostly associated with left-wing politics.
Right.
So I do think that there is some political undertones going on here. I think it's a very savvy move. Again, you're buying something on the low end right now that is underwater, that obviously shuttered its news division, and you might be able to build something, a foundation that you can attach Trump Media to.
Buy low, sell high.
Buy low, sell high. That's what it's all about. Ashley, I'll give you the last word here. I mean, you know this, Ashley, as well as I do, or if not better. Tech is hard. Building tech is hard, right? So if he's trying to get in here potentially and maybe shape the thing, I wonder what you think.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and I do agree with what Aaron said. This is a business deal for him. But how many other billionaires have invested into major media venues, whether it's Washington Post by Bezos, Lauren Powell Jobs with National Journal. So this isn't a surprise. By the way, I'm having a really hard time because I'm trying to look at you guys and feel involved, but I'm supposed to look at the camera. So I miss you.
That's all right. You're just on the other side.
She's right there.
Yeah, she's literally on the other side of the platform. A bigger studio for another day coming down the line. Ashley Davis, friend of the show. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
You got it. All right. Still to come here on the Hill over the next 48 minutes or so. James Lankford, he negotiated the Senate border bill for Republicans, but now he's going to vote against it? Why is that? The senator joins us live here on the Hill in about 20 minutes' time. We'll ask him. Plus, pigskin or politics? The NFL star Aaron Rodgers reveals why he turned down RFK Jr.'s offer to be his vice president. But first, on the other side of the break, Hot Mic with Mick.
I know the topics tonight, if that's your question.
We're going to talk about gas.
We're going to talk about gasoline. We're going to talk about presidential tax records. And I wrote this last one down. We talk about bleach, blonde, butch bodies.
You're missing a couple B's there.
A couple of B's, yes.
We'll get to it. There's a reason why we're talking about it. Hot Mic with Mick, other side of the break. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Time now for Hot Mic with Mick, the former congressman, budget director, White House chief of staff, tells us what he's hearing, what he's thinking. All right, Mulvaney, let's start here.
You always give me a lot of credit for that thinking part. I'm not really sure that applies, but go ahead. Mostly I'm making it up as you and I sit here.
There we go. That's the best television, is it not?
What would you like to talk about tonight, Bob?
You want to talk about your canceled flight or no?
No. Wow, hit a guy where he hurts. No, let's
talk about
gasoline instead.
Let's gasoline. The Biden administration announcing ahead of its Memorial Day weekend that it is releasing, you got me shook, it is releasing 1 million barrels of gasoline. It's hoping to bring down the price of gas. What's this all about? So they're releasing this gasoline, and they're basically saying prices are going to come down. Why are they doing this? And are we going to see more of this heading into the election?
Okay, so I think everyone's going to assume, including a lot of Republicans who probably voted for the bill I'm going to talk about in a second, are assuming this is pure politics. This is President Biden trying to lower the price of gasoline going into an election season. And there's certainly an element of that. But to all the Republicans who say that, I would point out this is actually mandated by law. When they passed the funding bill back in March, there was a provision in there that the administration had to liquidate the special reserve funds of gasoline that were set up after Superstorm Sandy.
Okay.
A lot of folks don't like the fact that it's sitting there. It's just a pile of money. And a lot of times Congress will go in and say, look, you have to liquidate this in order to help pay for that. It's called a pay for. So my guess is they saw this pot of money in the form of gasoline in the Northeast and said, you have to sell that. And Biden administration being smart about this,
So, yeah,
politicians said we'd do it, and we'll do it at the height of the summer driving season because that's the best political time to do it.
Okay. Do you think sort of any sort of releases out of the oil reserve? I know that's a separate thing.
This is separate.
I know it's separate, but do you think we'll get there?
And look, there's not enough gasoline in these reserves up in New York to make a big difference, I don't think, anyway.
Okay.
And if they did, they would probably be more local in blue states anyway. So I don't think this moves the needle very much, but it will get some attention over the Memorial Day weekend.
All right. A rather random bipartisan duo in the House is now pushing for transparency in that building right there, the White House. The Republican James Comer of Kentucky and the outgoing Democratic Congresswoman from California, Katie Porter, have introduced a bill that would require presidents and vice presidents to disclose tax returns, foreign payments, and expensive gifts and loan transactions. Now, the time frame includes 2 years before taking office, while serving in office, and then for 2 years after they get out of the White House. It would also require disclosures for immediate family members who receive foreign payments, expensive gifts, or loans. It sounds like this makes sense. No?
It actually does. When I first read it, I said, this is crazy. This is never going to pass, because I thought this was going to the issue that a lot of folks have claimed about with Donald Trump when he did not release his tax returns during the campaign. And what I thought they were trying to do is to say, look, if you want to run for president, you have to give us your tax returns. That would be unconstitutional, because the only limitations on running for president, being president, are 35 years old and a natural-born citizen. So you can't do that. I read the bill. And what the bill says, it's very well written. It only applies after you win. So after you become the president, this rule would apply to you. And I'm pretty sure that's constitutional. And I think the situation here is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You know, the Republicans say it's not really about Hunter Biden, and the Democrats say it's not really about Jared Kushner, but it is. And that's probably why this has a chance of passing. And I got to think if it passes, there's no way the Biden team White House would ever be able to veto.
So here's what they said, the White House on the bill. Quote, we're always happy to look at Congressman Comer's bright ideas, but they go on to say President Biden implemented the strictest ethics standards of any administration in history. So at least that's what they're saying now, but you got to wonder if this ever hits their desk.
I hadn't seen that quote until just now. I'd be happy to talk to the Biden administration about what's happening at the FDIC, where Martin Gruenberg was accused of creating a terribly hostile work environment, especially for women, and he's still working there. So I'm not sure about that highest standards ever, but it's still a good bull quote.
What do you think about this? Feels like it.
Government in the sunshine. I mean, but we do also have to set into context that the reason why we're talking about tax filings for presidents at all is that Donald Trump decided he wasn't going to share his tax filings for the first time in 50 years since President Nixon. This really shouldn't be a discussion. It should be a given that we want to make sure that there are no conflicts with the president of the United States and whatever interests he might have from a financial perspective.
Yeah, I think this is the stuff that the Oversight Committee is supposed to be doing. I wish they would spend more time doing the good government work, a lot of which we saw during my time and Mick's time when we were at the committee. Fun fact, we were at the committee at the same time. Who knew that? On the same side, actually. But that's why the committee exists, is to do the transparency, to do the waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement of government, to root it out and to come up with solutions, not to do ridiculous taxpayer-funded witch hunts.
How do you argue against this?
I don't think that there's much good argument for it. This is a good transparency measure. I like that, to Mick's point, this happens after they become president, that this gives every side the win they want, right? This is a bipartisan target. If you're Republicans, you can argue for this. If you're Democrat, you can argue for this. So arguing against it is just arguing against transparency. That's not a winning argument.
Okay. And then there's this, the Democratic lawmaker from Texas, Jasmine Crockett. She just filed paperwork to officially trademark a viral insult that she made toward the Georgia Congresswoman, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Watch.
If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
What now?
You know what popped into my mind when I heard that?
You should patent that.
What's a ute? You remember that? What now? From my cousin Vinny, these two utes. What's a ute? The phrase will be part of the Congresswoman's clapback collection featuring swag from random things the lawmaker has said. Now, the money will go towards supporting House Democrats. You can see Marjorie Taylor Greene there. Here's the thing. Is this now using congressional hearings to fundraise and to sort of, not to fundraise, Is he using congressional hearings as, is he using it as like a side hustle, right? Like, I'm going to go to a hearing, I'm going to try to get viral, I'm going to then post some merch, we're going to make money, and that's how we're going to do it.
Yeah, but that's not new. What do you think the Matt Gaetzes and the AOCs are doing anyway? They're not there to be lawmakers.
On the merchandise, though?
They're there to build their personal brand, so when they leave, they can make a bunch of money. Whether or not they make merchandise now, or they've got 3 million followers they turn into a show on MSNBC afterwards. I mean, look, I get it. I don't like it, but I think there's bigger problems right now with Congress. I'm sitting here wondering if I should have copyrighted the House Freedom Caucus when we had a chance. I didn't.
Would you have made money off that?
Probably not, but I wouldn't. But I could have some influence over who gets to use the name or not.
So anyway, Hot Mike with Mick yet?
I'm not. Well, I think Thurman owns Hot Mike with Mick.
I don't know anything. No.
But anyway, so it's a fun little story. She's not going to make any real money off of it anyway. Liz Warren did the same thing under her, still the woman persisted kind of. This stuff happens all the time.
Okay.
Eric Swalwell made a cat toy making fun of Kevin McCarthy.
Did he?
Yeah.
Eric Swalwell also passed gas on television, so he did. Everybody's heard the audio on it.
There was that incident. This has gone viral, though, and now she's trying to...
I still think the best line in that whole thing is Comer's.
Which was?
Say what now? That would make a great T-shirt. I think that more of explains, I think, how most Americans feel about Congress than the part about the beach body, whatever.
You're getting out of here?
Apparently not, because my flight is canceled.
Are you hanging around, or are you getting out of here? I think during the commercial break, we're going to make a decision on whether Mick's hanging around or not.
Can we vote? Can we do like a vote?
We all want Mick to say he's got to figure out what he's doing next.
Does Ashley get a vote? I think she's going to beat me up when I walk out.
No, he's out of here. All right, still much more ahead here on the Hill. Senator James Langford joins us on the other side of the break. He negotiated the Senate border security bill. So why does he plan to now vote against it? We're live with the senator in a few. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Tomorrow, Senate Democrats will once again bring up the bipartisan border security bill. Now, the measure would grant the administration emergency powers to close the border, strengthen asylum requirements, and allow emergency work authorization for asylum seekers. Now, why are the Democrats pushing this, since there is little doubt it will once again be killed, not go anywhere in the Senate? Kelly Meyer, hello.
Hey.
Going to be hanging out with us here for the next 30 or so. Mulvaney had to go catch his plane, hopefully. Why is the White House doing this? Why are Democrats doing this? Lay it out. This is going nowhere.
Yeah, and they got a lot of questions on that today in the briefing.
Yeah.
Essentially, why go forward with this when it's just set up for failure? But we've been talking a lot about this with the administration really going on defense, or putting Republicans on defense over the past week. They're really saying they're trying to flip the script on them, trying to paint Republicans as they're the ones that aren't taking up this border issue. They are pushing for this vote to happen tomorrow. We saw President Biden spoke with McConnell and Johnson, the leaders of the Republicans party in the House and the Senate earlier this week. But we also heard from Karine Jean-Pierre in the White House briefing today saying why they are continuing with this effort, even though, as we said, it's set up for failure.
I think the point is they're trying to go on offense, right? After watching what happened at the southern border for the first, call it 3 years of this administration.
Yeah.
Now they sort of see an opening potentially.
Exactly. Putting Republicans on defense, flipping the script on there. And I believe we have a soundbite from Karine Jean-Pierre if we want to play that. I don't know if we have it there.
It's up to Republicans in Congress if this is going to be successful or not. But there is literally a bipartisan deal that was worked on for months that can start dealing with this issue. There is. And why do we need a new deal when there's one right there that they negotiated on?
So this is putting, though, Democrats in a tough place. Democrats with tough reelects in a tough position, that they are going to be put in a position that they might vote against this.
Right.
And on top of this, we're still wondering when the administration might take executive action. They keep saying the same thing, quote, "We are always evaluating policy options."
All right. Come on in, Senator James Langford. He is a Republican from Oklahoma who was the top Republican negotiating with Democrats and the White House initially on this border bill. Senator Langford, first time here on the Hill, I believe. Thanks for being here with us. Appreciate the time. So you heard the White House there, that they're pushing for this, right? And you initially pushed for this. You negotiated it with Democrats, with Kristen Sinema, independent, with the White House. So why now are you going to vote against the bill that you negotiated?
Yeah, this is no longer a bill. This is now a prop. And that's been my frustration. If we're going to solve the problem, let's solve the problem on it. But now this has just moved into politics. When I worked for months on this with Chris Murphy and with Kirsten Sinema, we were working to get a bill to try to be able to pass something to be able to resolve it. Clearly that didn't happen. That failed. And so my focus is, if that doesn't work, then let's try to figure out what can work on it. The House passed H.R. 2, sent that over to the Senate. We brought it to the Senate, voted on it. Democrats all voted against that. So this whole game of, well, Republicans voted against this and Democrats voted against that, no one cares anymore. At this point, everybody's just saying there's 5,200 people that illegally crossed the border yesterday. Just solve it. Just make that stop. And I think that's the frustration everybody has is, fix this. Don't just do this. Fix it.
I agree that folks outside of Washington could care less about the politics. They just want something done. When you went to the Senate floor, though, and sort of pitched this earlier this year, here's what you said. You said in part, quote, Americans, whether you are a Republican, Democrat, or Independent, are all unanimous on this issue. This is a problem that needs to be solved. Do what you can. Today we get to decide if we are going to do that or not, if we are going to do nothing or do something. Why, though, now seemingly is do nothing the acceptable view?
Yeah, it's not, and I don't know why this has become the issue of just being politics for the next several months, other than we're in the middle of the presidential campaign. Everybody's trying to be able to get leverage on it. Right now, President Biden has significant executive authorities he's choosing not to use. You don't even have to compare it to President Trump. You can go back to President Obama. We have the exact same immigration laws under President Obama, President Trump, and President Biden. If I go back to President Obama, they had about 500,000 people a year that were illegally crossing the border. Under President Biden, same exact laws, same exact executive authorities. We have 2.5 million people that are illegally crossing the border. So if President Biden would just use the same authorities President Obama used, we'd have a very different border right now. At the same time, Congress needs to change the definition of asylum. We need to take out a lot of the appeals process. We need to speed up the decision-making process. Those are only things that can be done in law. So we shouldn't even have 500,000 people crossing the border. That was dramatic under President Obama. We shouldn't have that anymore. So that's what we were trying to do with this piece of legislation, is to be able to resolve that. At the end of the day, there's been no real work on this since we worked on it several months ago. My focus is, if we really want to pass something, get everybody back in the room again, try to resolve it. But there's been no work on that at all. This is literally just a messaging prop to do fundraising out there on.
Are you not hearing from the White House at all? Have you spoken to the president recently or his team?
The White House has not reached out. The president has not reached out. No Democrat has reached out. Chuck Schumer has not reached out to me on this one. The way that I found out this bill was coming back up was I got a text message last week from a Democrat colleague saying, hey, this is going to come up next week for a vote. So there's been zero work on this. This group knows how you actually get things in Washington, D.C. done. You've got to sit down with people you disagree with, hammer the things out to say this bill didn't pass, so what will pass on it? There's been zero effort on that. That's why I call this a prop,
Have you heard from Donald
a fundraising piece. Just track every single Democrat's going to put out a fundraising piece after this fails tomorrow, and they're going to say, I fought to be able to get it done. That's really the goal of this, not to try to pass something.
Have you heard from Donald Trump?
I have not, actually. No, he's not called me on it either on it. So the other interesting thing no one's talking about on this is watch and see how many Democrats voted for this when it had Israel and Ukraine funding attached to it versus tomorrow when it comes back up, because there'll be a whole group of Democrats that will not vote for it tomorrow. So the numbers will be less tomorrow than what they were 2 months ago when this came up. And that's the frustration that I have with this is we need to show momentum that we're getting things done, not that it's getting worse.
You mentioned the word frustration. Are you frustrated at all that Trump killed the first bill, the one that you negotiated?
Yeah, I'm frustrated with the whole process on that, to say the least. Obviously, President Trump came out and said, hey, this is not good politics. Wait till the presidential election to be able to resolve this. There were folks that came out and gave all kinds of false information about the bill. There was the famous, it lets 5,000 people in every single day, which is completely 100% false. But there was all that kind of rumor that was out there. It takes away executive authority. It makes things worse. We heard it all. But when you actually go through the bill, it actually increases the number of agents, doubles the deportation flights, increases the number of screenings that are actually done, speeds up the screenings, takes away a lot of the appeals process to get to a faster decision, changes the way the asylum is done. It makes a very significant difference. Did it get everything we wanted in it? No. but it got a lot of things done in it, and that's where I'd love to see this or something like it pass. But to do that, you've got to have a real effort to be able to get it done, and that's not what we're seeing this week. We're just seeing a messaging vote.
I want to leave you with this, Senator. White House memo today in which they name you in it, by the way, if you haven't seen it. But here's the headline. Quote, while President Biden sides with U.S. Border Patrol, congressional Republicans side with fentanyl traffickers. What would you say to the White House?
It's painful, and they know that's wrong. I would tell you we got a 20% increase in the price of groceries, 55% increase in the price of gasoline since Biden has been president. The only price that's gone down is fentanyl. That's because we've had an open border and we're flooded right now with fentanyl into our country. So if President Biden wants to implement the border the same way President Obama did, he could do that right now, and it would dramatically reduce the amount of fentanyl coming into our country and people that are coming into our country that mean to do us harm, because we've had a skyrocketing number of what they call special interest aliens that are coming in the last 18 months. Folks from China, from Russia, from Pakistan, from West Africa, from the Middle East, from Tajikistan. These folks are coming in very high numbers now that we have no criminal history and no way to be able to connect why they're coming.
We'll leave it there. Senator James Lankford from Oklahoma. Appreciate the time, sir. We hope to have you on back here on the Hill.
You bet.
What'd you hear from him there?
I heard a frustrated lawmaker, someone who, in earnest, tried to get a bipartisan deal done, someone who negotiated in good faith with all of his colleagues, independents, Democrats, and Republicans, who was one of the most conservative members in the United States Senate, and saw it all go to hell because of politics, and that's incredibly frustrating.
Isn't it fair to say that, and I wanted to get tons to get to with him, but isn't it fair to say that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are both to blame for what happens between now and January? Because nothing's going to get done between now and January, except for executive order. The president's waiting on that, and then on Trump killed this.
Well, I think that
Biden's waiting, Trump killed it.
Right, and I think what will happen is they'll do this bill, it'll fail, Biden will then do executive orders, and then the ball will kind of be in the Republican court of like, okay, we did our thing, we tried to do the bill, we did the executive order. What's your solution other than saying wait till we win the election, then we'll do something?
So here's the thing on inflation, right? Two biggest issues, border inflation. On inflation, you cannot tell people the economy is doing well when they don't feel it. Mm-hmm. On the border, can you tell people, oh, this is actually Republicans' fault when Democrats have been in the White House for the last 3
Well, I think
years?
that's what a lot of this discussion is about, is casting the Democratic Party as the solutions party, right? It's not dissimilar actually from the arguments that we heard around healthcare coverage and the healthcare law, which is we've got a plan. In this case, we've worked with the other side on what we think is a reasonable path forward, and ultimately Donald Trump killed it.
Give you the last word here.
I completely agree with Senator Lankford and understand his frustration. And I agree with him that using this bill now just for messaging and partisan issues, when before it was a bipartisan measure. They worked hard to get legislation that could go to the floor. It didn't have a likely chance in the House, but it could have at least gone to the chamber, and if the Speaker brought it up or not.
Maybe some debate and back and forth.
But the fact that they are using it, Democrats now, for pure politics, same thing with Biden putting out the gasoline right on Memorial Day weekend, you will again see these messaging opportunities that the White House and Democrats will take to try and say, look, we're doing what we can, but that's not going to solve. You can't tell the American people things are getting better if they don't feel it themselves.
All right, still to come here on the Hill, just how close was Aaron Rodgers to becoming the vice presidential pick for RFK Jr.? He is now talking about this. The star quarterback reveals what was behind his difficult choice, football or politics. Aaron Rodgers lays it out. Other side of the break, you're watching The Hill.
Will reproductive rights be center stage in the 2024 election? Now some Republicans are coming to the defense of IVF. Hear how and why when Senator Ted Cruz joins Leland. Plus the man behind the latest IVF attack ad hoping to sink the GOP in November. On Balance tonight.
Aaron Rodgers got to being RFK Jr.'s running mate. Rodgers essentially described it as a career ultimatum. Watch.
I love Bobby. We had a couple really nice conversations. But there were really two options. It was retire and be his VP or keep playing. And I want to keep playing.
It's kind of wild to see a New York Jets logo in the background. We're actually talking about the vice presidency, potentially.
He hasn't actually really played for them yet, if I recall. Just on
3 plays or 4 plays?
But one of the big reasons why he didn't do it, 2-year contract, $75 million.
Yeah, he's not giving up that 30 or 40 million this year or whatever it is. What do you make of RFK? I mean, like this, this now confirms it was a real thing. Like, this wasn't fake. This wasn't publicity. We don't think, at least.
Well, I think to a level it is publicity because nobody, to Kurt's point, really thought that Aaron Rodgers was going to retire and leaving all that money on the table.
Well, do you think
Brady lost his entire family by not retiring? You think that like somebody was going to change that to try and run? No, I'm being like serious. Like, people give a lot to try and play football at the highest level. They will give every measure that they can of themselves to play at that level. And Aaron Rodgers still feels deeply competitive about this. RFK, though, loves to grab a headline. Yeah. So yes, they might have had serious conversations. He might have thought it was real. There could have been a real offer there, but when you're an athlete like that level of competitiveness,
you ever think RFK Jr. ever thought that this, like, oh, maybe this could be?
I just am thinking back to the like you said, a lot of us didn't think that this was actually real, like that he was actually going to pick Aaron Rodgers as his VP. And as you said, him coming out there and confirming that he had this option on the table. But I can imagine it may be hard to turn down. I mean, that's a huge opportunity, but who knows?
So we're talking about it right now. Cue up the Bardella clip from yesterday, because we were talking about President Biden and another issue. And Kurt said this yesterday on this show. Watch.
Every day we hear Democrats say this is the most important election of our lifetime, that democracy hangs in balance, et cetera, et cetera. Right. If that is true, shouldn't you avail yourself of every tool and resource humanly imaginable to stay competitive and to win?
Okay, so why am I bringing that up again? Let's show some headlines here from RFK Jr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. invests $24,000 in GameStop in apparent play for ape vote. What's going on in that community? Another headline, RFK Jr. has $5 billion reparation plan to top Biden and Trump in November. It seems like he is doing, add Aaron Rodgers to it, what you think the Democrats should be doing, which is just sort of throw it all out there.
Yeah, again, and I reiterate what I said. This is, by all accounts, the most important election we'll ever have. Whatever side you are on, you should be using every resource possible to reach every pocket of voters, every demographic, every niche, whether it's GameStop, whether it's WWE or NASCAR fans or country music fans or whatever subset of voters there are, find them, because this is going to be the narrowest election we've ever had. This is one where 10,000 votes could make the difference in some of these swing states. Go after everything, everywhere, all the time.
Well, remember, sorry, go ahead, Kelly. I just want to say RFK Jr. is trying to get on the ballot in every state still. So he's only on 7. He's has signatures for 8, but he's trying to get on the ballot in all 50 states and D.C., so he's making that effort.
I mean, just fundamentally, the most valuable thing you have on any campaign is your candidate's time. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit different when your candidate is the sitting president of the United States. He's not going to, with all due respect, Kurt, he's not going to try and dig into every little niche. He's going to stay in the space.
But he could. I mean, I remember
what he's doing though with student loans, for example. Like he's doing it in.
I mean, there's a reason why the campaign's doing things like putting Kamala Harris on the Drew Barrymore show, why he's doing Howard Stern. Like they are trying to do some version of that. I think that again, there are a lot of niches right now that you can reach voters who are disaffected, who are turned off of the whole process, understandably so. Go find them. You got to meet people where they are. That's the only way it's going to work.
I think that's absolutely true. But also, you need to shore up the big numbers, which is why he's doing the student loan piece, and then go after that later.
Well, let's remember here that at the end of the day, because this is going to be such a close election, for both candidates, what they are going to have to do is drive base turnout tremendously. Because if you're Joe Biden, you're looking at a huge base issue that is persistent for his campaign. So what he needs to do is, he's going to try to find the voters where he is. RFK is going to try to find enough people to sign enough ballots so he can get on there. And Donald Trump's going to try to get as many Republicans out as possible because, yes, while the independent and that small group that sits of 40 to 70,000 that really decide an election in the United States, that is who you target, and the rest you just got to drive your base.
You still need the enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Over to Memphis, Tennessee real quick. This story is amazing. A federal judge has blocked efforts to sell Elvis Presley's Graceland mansion. Now, the landmark home was initially set to be auctioned off in a foreclosure sale tomorrow, after a private company alleged the home was used as collateral on a nearly $4 million loan taken out by Elvis's late daughter, Lisa Marie, but never paid back. Now, Lisa Marie's daughter, Elvis's granddaughter, Riley Keough, inherited Graceland. She said the claims were false she gets to keep Graceland, at least for the moment. This has like all the elements of what's going on here.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about, different conversations about AI and fraud and how different things are being used to try to, upend our entire society. This is really scary. Because she's saying that that's what happened, that they falsified documents to
like
make
the
it look
notary
like that
and all
there's a loan
was
that really wasn't. It's like, yeah, that's really terrifying.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, the king prevails. People will be able to continue to enjoy Graceland. I love it.
Anyone ever been?
I have not. No, I went to his birthplace, though, in Tupelo, Mississippi. It is a very small house, about the size of this studio.
Really?
I prefer Dollywood.
You prefer Dollywood? You're a Dollywood kind of guy? All right, we'll leave it there.
Seen neither.
Seen neither? Neither have I. Gotta go. All right, coming up, what Walmart, Target, and Home Depot all have in common and what it could mean for the biggest race of them all. Think about it. They're some of the biggest companies in this country. They're all saying basically the same thing. Leland Vitter joins us on the other side of the break. You're watching The Hill. All right, before we say goodbye, here's a story that caught our eye. One of the largest retailers in this country, Target, announcing this week it's cutting prices on roughly 5,000 frequently purchased items. Today, during its earnings call, a top executive for the company flashed a warning sign about the state of the American consumer. Listen.
Higher interest rates, uncertainty around the future of the economy, continued social and political divisiveness, and the upcoming election cycles have consumers concerned about what lies ahead.
All right, so that from Target today. It also comes as Walmart and Home Depot both shared similar concerns about American consumers pulling back to save money. Host of On Balance, Leland Vitter. To me, we see all these polls about the economy and how people feel. I think this is the best poll, is it not? Like Target, Walmart, Home Depot, they have billions of dollars in revenue, and they're all saying the same thing right now.
And they have an enormous amount of data on what consumers are not buying. 56% of Americans think we're in a recession right now. And they blame President Biden for it. I think from a politics standpoint, because I know that that's what you cover. To be fair, President Biden has a point when he says a lot of this is because of the guy before me. Donald Trump, in terms of running up
printing money,
running up huge deficits.
Biden printed money too.
All fair, but this didn't just happen in the past 3 years or in a vacuum. But that's the thing about being a leader of the free world. The buck stops with you, and that's who